Awesome. Well, if you participated, you know that we often have a book giveaway, and this one is very exciting. Julia Walsh is a CEO of Brand Medicine International, and her book, What We Really Asked Dr. Google, is a great book, and we have one to give away. So in order to do that, we have a question. So at the we've got a great trivia question, so the first attendee with the correct answer in the chat box wins. So our first question is, in 2021, what healthcare related question was the most searched on Google? So give everybody just a second. Yeah, seeing some great answers in there. And the answer is, how can I recover from COVID-19 faster? So not a huge surprise there. And then our winner is if we have our winner announced. And I don't see our winner announced yet. Okay, so that just may be me, but we will come back and announce the winner because we definitely have one. Thanks for all the answers there, and enjoy your book. I'll announce it as we start. So our first session, happy to make a quick introduction here and turn this over. Rachel, who's head of marketing and communications with HITLAB, will introduce our speaker. Rachel, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Lisa, and good morning, Julia. And thank you so much for joining us. It is nighttime for you now in Australia, correct?
That's correct. It's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Well, thank you for joining us. We'll let you go get back to sleep soon. But thank you for being here today. I guess Julia is the CEO of a company called Brand Medicine International. She's also the author of a book called What We Really Asked Dr. Google, Digital Insight, Healthcare Insights in the Age of Digital Health. And thank you for being with us. Julia, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your book, and kind of what was your impetus for writing it?
Thank you, Rachel. Well, I guess I've worked for a very long time with many clients across the industry, across categories, on developing digital assets to be published online in the hope of connecting with patients and healthcare professional stakeholders. And what I felt like while we were investing all of this money and time in developing these assets, we never really understood what actually happened when these stakeholders turned to the internet and exchanged those questions for health advice. And so the impetus for kind of undertaking the research that I did that led to the book was really to try and find what is happening in this dynamic, if it was able to be understood at all. And then I stumbled across the concept of search listening that was really being led by a girl called Sophie Coley out of London. And that's really to study aggregated, anonymized healthcare queries for strategic insights. So it's kind of different than, like, traditionally we use those, that information for driving SEO, but this is really to actually analyze it. And then I kind of took it the next level to follow through to see what are the landing pages that people are going to based on the questions that they're asking, and who's actually influencing them across that landscape. So, so then really, as I developed my methodology over about 18 months, I just wanted to put it down somewhere. And so that's how the book came about.
So what were some of the big moments that you learned while doing all of your research and, exploring? And as you were writing the book, what were some of the kind of aha moments and things that you discovered that were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening?
I think the biggest thing for me was discovering how deeply infused with emotion search queries are. People aren't just asking, seeking a fact. They're really reflecting how they feel. And so a big chunk of my methodology and what's in the book is looking at how the stages of grief overlay with the patient journey and how that comes through in the types of questions that people ask at different points. So, someone who's in denial, which we're all familiar with, might ask, can my HIV test be wrong? Or someone who is in the bargaining stage might say, can newly diagnosed diabetes be reversed? And then someone who's at the acceptance stage will start to talk about the disease as my high blood pressure or, my cholesterol. And so you start to see in the questions, it's all infused with emotion as well. I think the disconnect is where we've developed content and we've come back with answers. First of all, a lot of the time, the questions they really ask are not being answered. But the second thing is I don't think we're delivering the empathy and compassion that patients need. Because if we think about it, and I'd actually love to ask the attendees today, like who has actually turned to Dr. Google themselves to seek health advice personally in the last week? How many of you, if you want to just throw your hands up, I'd be really interested to see. Yeah. Because even though many of us probably all work in healthcare on one level or another, we all still rely on this. And I think the reality is that Dr. Google is a virtual team member of every multiple disciplinary team across every point of the patient journey. So it's really important to acknowledge that. Another thing that really surprised me was that search query data is a reflection of our consciousness in a way, of our collective consciousness, because it changes all the time. So we see through the course of real world events, the search query data changing as a ripple effect as people turn to the internet and seek information about it. So it offers us almost like a real-time read on real world events, particularly if you're working on a product that might have had a recall or in a big category where a major player has simply recently been added into the mix. So you can actually really study that as well.
I mean, fascinating that you categorize, the search queries by stages of grief, and that really you're saying that, Dr. Google is one of the key stakeholders that should be part of the equation when taking into account the patient. Based on your insights and what you've learned, how can this be translated to help both, patient, what can we do to, based on the information, help patients, help physicians, help pharma companies, help providers to better care for patients based on, the fact that people are searching for these things?
I think we can do a great job once we start listening to the real world queries and understanding the real world digital information experience, and take that into account in our strategic planning and as we develop healthcare communications. Because if we're not accounting for that, I guess the way that I see it, Google estimates that there's in excess of 1 billion healthcare related questions asked every day. And that's just into that search engine alone. And so that was a statistic from before the pandemic too. And I think we've all certainly amplified our reliance on the internet for health advice through the pandemic. So if we think about the fact, if from our own behavior, we're going there to seek advice, that's going to inform our opinions and that's going to drive our actions. And then if you ladder that up, imagine the massive impact that this is having on the broader healthcare ecosystem. So there's health outcomes implications for that, but there's also commercial implications for that. So I think where we can help patients and doctors is by understanding the questions that they're actually asking, understanding their real world digital information experience, and then where it's failing, which I can assure you there's definitely a lot of work to be done. Where it's failing, we can start to address that by developing the right kind of bite-sized content that's going to turn up where and when these patient stakeholders need it to, and the healthcare professional stakeholders too.
Right.
Because you can actually pull apart the types of questions and find out if it's a doctor or a patient asking it. Like a patient might ask, Prolia, what does it do to the body? Whereas a doctor will ask denosumab MOA. And so you can actually go, well, that's definitely not a patient, that latter question. So what is the search engine result page that stakeholder has been taken to? Okay, we can find out that that healthcare professional did or did not actually get the answer that they were seeking. And then we can address that.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. And how do you see the role of Google changing, or how can Google evolve with the evolving healthcare system and, more tech and whatnot? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I guess if you could just go a little bit more into depth.
I think as an industry, we need to just simply take a more active role in understanding and driving what that digital landscape looks like. Because Google, they already do a great job with their algorithms, but they can only do so much. And I think it's when we actually look through the lens of our stakeholders at the digital information experience that they're actually having, then we can create the kind of content that is actually meeting that need. And I think it's really up to us.
Right. All right. And again, anything else that you'd like to add, Julia? I know we're almost out of time, but is there any last minute thoughts that you want to add and share with the audience?
I think there's great opportunities to leverage the Google Your Money or Your Life philosophy. They are already committed to cleaning up the internet. And when we are actually actively involved in what I call search listening optimization, so rather than starting with the search engine as the center of our approach, or our own websites and digital assets as the approach, we're actually starting with the end user in mind. And by doing that and finding out misinformation that might be misleading them and cleaning that up by reporting it to Google, then we can actually do a better job for accelerating patients from those niggling symptoms through to an actual diagnosis and onto treatment, and then encouraging quality use of medicines. So I get really excited about the perspective of adopting search listing optimization as an industry, and ultimately cleaning up the internet for patients and doing a better job of helping healthcare professionals have the information at their fingertips that they seek.
Wonderful. Well, Julia, thank you so much. I think, Lisa, do we have more time, or we're done?
I think we're done. We're done. Thank you both.
Thank you, Julia, and have a good rest of the night.
Thank you so much, Rachel and team. Bye.
Bye.
I was one of those people Googling this week, not for myself, but for my animals, right? I mean, that's, I think of caregivers, they're not just to people, but to our animals sometimes too. So this is very exciting. Be sure to check out the chat box for a link to Julia if you would like to connect, but also to purchase her book. So thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Julia.